maybe this is his approach to just like destroy the company.
He's trying to make it appear as if he's a bumbling moron who's like trying all these things to fix Twitter, but he's actually destroying it intentionally, right? And who could say that that's not going to be a net positive on society, right?
Hello, welcome back to Radius of Reason. This is episode 17, where we're going to dive into what the fuck is happening at Twitter.
What is happening at Twitter?
Before we get into that, I think that we should probably give a warm welcome to our latest coalition of subscribers that we brought in. Andrew Tate haters or Andrew Tate lovers who are maliciously just smashing that subscribe button to our channel. Welcome. It's good to have you. We hope that we keep you entertained, and really apologize in advance that this is not, in fact, an Andrew Tate hate podcast, which maybe that's the best business model we could have at this point. Yeah.
That's what they recommended on Hustlers University.
To just have a platform solely dedicated to hating Andrew Tate. Quite brilliant.
We'll hate on Elon instead today.
Yeah,
somewhat.
We'll discuss Elon. We'll discuss what's happening too. I suppose if Andrew Tate had acquired Twitter or something, we'd be forced to be in that position as well. But Radius of Reason is a show where we take things happening in the news and politics. We take esoteric philosophical concepts and conspiracy theories, and we just break them down into terms that like cavemen could understand if they were listening to podcasts in their cozy little caves. You can find us on all standard channels for podcasts, your Spotify's, your podcast apps, your YouTube's, obviously. We're not on Rumble yet, but depending on how this episode goes, we might have to relocate to there as well. Probably not.
What about our Twitter account?
We do have a Twitter account. You could follow us.
How's that going, Andre?
Oh, we have 2 subscribers. Always happy to talk to our 2 subscribers. Our one fan, I think from like one of those states. Anyways, hello to them as well. Our 2 devoted followers. Okay. So.
Enough about our low subscriber count. It is climbing.
It is climbing.
People are recognizing
the message of the gospel.
Real recognize real. So,
but yes, if you like what we do, please follow us on any platform you might consume your podcasts on. Please follow us on Twitter at radius_of. We'd love to be in touch. Let us know what you think. Except stay away from the damn YouTube comments. Just stay away.
I like the YouTube comments.
Yeah.
In a very sick way.
Yeah, maybe. We should interview them like in person and see what comes.
All of our future guests will be YouTube.
People who hate us on YouTube. Which would be novel. So, let's start this episode out. Levon, what the fuck is going on Twitter?
Well, we know Elon was going to be very trigger happy as soon as he acquired Twitter. And he has proven himself to be very trigger happy, but I don't think anybody expected what we're seeing right now, which seems to be utter chaos from the outside. Perhaps there is some logic to it. We'll look at that a little bit later on. But he basically fired / laid off 50% of the workforce as soon as he got in there. And then there's been additional things going on. He's been firing people that criticize him on Twitter employees, current Twitter employees that criticize them on Twitter on a comment on a tweet that he made. He then fired them in that same comment thread.
Was that one employee?
That was one, but there's other examples apparently.
Okay.
So I don't know. It seems crazy. And then, he's implemented this kind of blue check mark thing, the $8 a month subscription.
Which it's not a thing anymore.
Which is not. He's put it on hold because it went unbelievably poorly. I know when I heard this, I thought, okay, he's going to charge for people to get verified and have the blue check mark. But what he actually did was simply charge to have a blue check mark, which is not associated with actually being verified.
Which led in itself to a separate series of circumstances where you had a series of imposter accounts appearing up, one of which was actually impersonating Elon Musk himself, which I believe was also verified through the Twitter Blue approach, which, of course, I think the Elon Musk parody account was very quickly banned. So we're at this full circle where there was a faction of individuals out there in the ether that were really saying that Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter was going to be this huge win for free speech absolutism. But it kind of gives a level of vibe that, in fact, we're not in a free speech utopia where it's just a different entity controlling the platform that's still going to be banning people for
it turns out it's actually really difficult to moderate online content.
Absolutely. As we know with all of our vast amounts of commentary.
Incredibly offensive Andrew Tate discrimination.
Yeah, point. Yeah.
I want to give an example actually of like concretely what has happened here at Twitter, because it's very fascinating. So one thing that's happened is he sent out an email, right, where he said the following: going forward, to build a breakthrough Twitter 2.0 and succeed in an increasingly competitive world, we will need to be extremely hardcore. This will mean working long hours at high intensity. Only exceptional performance will constitute a passing grade. And then he offered a link for the employees to click on if they're on board with that. And then he concluded the email by saying, anyone who has not done so by 5 p.m. will receive 3 months of severance. And apparently many employees did not, in fact, click on that link. And so he is really trying to weed out almost anyone who's not 100% on his team, right? Who's not gung-ho about his vision of Twitter, whatever that may be. I don't know what he's actually offered. You know, we don't know all the details. You know, we don't know if he's given some, unbelievable presentation, and some people are just disagreeing with it, or like they have no idea what's going on. And they just know Elon Musk from, his Twitter rants, right? So that happened. But I was also listening to a New York Times podcast where they were interviewing 2 current Twitter employees about what's going on. And they were speaking about this implementation of the blue check mark verification, the $8 a month
Twitter
subscription.
Blue. Yeah,
Twitter Blue. And they said, this is a feature that normally would take like 3 to 6 months to implement with all the testing that has to be done, etc. But Elon basically wanted it done, quote unquote, next Monday. So, I mean, look, I work in software development, this isn't like, this isn't some sort of like hit piece on Elon. This is very consistent with what I understand with basic logic. But these are actually like monumental changes that he wants done overnight. And unsurprisingly, it went incredibly poorly. What does that say about his state of mind right now?
Well, you could also make the argument that this is just the state of mind of Elon Musk, because from what I remember, very similar complaints were issued towards him in the past 5-6 years at Tesla, where he'd set very unrealistic production goals and just walk away from it. And that's when you have the controversies of like the outdoor assembly facilities that Tesla had to throw up because they had to meet these like insane quotas that to basically like stretch out tents in the middle of the desert to assemble these cars. So I think it's a very kind of Elon Musk quote unquote approach to management, where you just set this insane like barrier to completion, and then you walk away from it, and whatever happens to a certain extent. I think it's one thing I wanted to point out first of all with the severances. It's interesting that so you have like the severances that current employees are getting if they don't want to stick to his vision, right? But you also have the really kind of high profile executives that Elon laid off at Twitter as well, who departed with like millions upon millions of dollars, and kind of their golden parachutes that they sort of fled the company with. And I think the stark contrast to that is also a little bit interesting, where you have like a microcosm of the managerial class escaping this shit show with like millions of dollars, and then like the low level like software developers are kind of stuck picking up the pieces. Which is shit. I mean, honestly, but the thing about Elon Musk, I think that is really going to, I think, color this whole situation with Twitter is Elon Musk kind of becomes his companies to a certain extent, right? Where, I mean, I couldn't tell you who the leadership at Twitter was beforehand. I couldn't tell you what the leadership was like at Solar City before Elon Musk acquired it. He really sort of steps into this role of like, he becomes the personification of said company, which then directly impacts how the brand develops and how the brand evolves. And I think now we're seeing this transition of Twitter from its maybe classic as in pre-Elon position to now being directly linked to Elon Musk. And what is that going to do for Twitter in the future? I mean, that's just as random and chaotic as whatever his vision for 2.0 is.
Will there be a mass exodus?
A mass exodus. Well,
of users.
Of users. Oh, I think one of the things that's defined the Twitter user historically is just like a huge propensity to criticize Twitter. It's like that is the nature of being a Twitter user, is to just complain about Twitter. I don't know if there's going to be a mass exodus, because everybody kind of started taking like a posturing on it when it turned out Elon was going to acquire it. I don't know how many people have actually left. And also, like, okay, you leave, fine. And there's been chatter that they're trying to find an alternative platform to go to.
They're trying to find an alternative platform,
right? Like
like Mastodon.
Mastodon, right? Like Mastodon, and it's just like in the era when Donald Trump was originally kicked off, you had conservatives fleeing to whatever conservative Truth Social or whatever. I mean, yeah, I'm sure these platforms are afloat, but you just can't replicate the community that Twitter is.
Yeah, not overnight, right?
Certainly not overnight. So I don't know if.
And there's too much commercial interest at stake for a lot of people,
right?
For a lot of the most influential people on Twitter.
Right.
So as long as they remain on Twitter.
And it's going to be very, very hard to replicate an audience of like 500,000 people on another platform that, I mean, Twitter is it's kind of like entered into this realm of like headspace. It's captured in our culture where it's synonymous. It's a verb almost, right? To tweet. That's a thing now. I don't go in Mastodon, right? I don't know what that is.
What would be the equivalent of tweeting on Mastodon?
I don't know.
Masting?
Masterdoning?
Masturbating?
Yeah. So I don't think there's going to be an exodus personally. What about you?
Not anytime in the near future. I would hope that we do come up with better social media platforms. If Twitter isn't able to revolutionize itself, at some point, all social media platforms have to, evolve. And so it's a matter of whether they can evolve effectively. If not, they will be outcompeted for sure. And so speaking of Twitter's evolution, what do you have to say about what Elon might be trying to achieve, in this moment with his vision?
My personal belief is that he's just trolling everybody. I don't actually think there is a vision. I think that this is just, I had a moment a couple of weeks back, like when the headlines first started popping up about the layoffs and the long hours that people were expected to work. I think to me, it was just sort of this like multi-billion-dollar meme that he's created, where even the language he's using in the letter that you read that he sent out to his employees, it's kind of almost like trolling tech company like work culture. It's like, oh, we're like really gonna have to hustle really hard, and we're gonna have to be here long hours. And I mean, it's almost like he's
also filtering out like people who maybe don't have a sense of humor, or his sense of humor, maybe too. I don't know. I don't know if that's really a great strategy when when you're in charge of a massive corporation.
But that's the thing, is I think there is no strategy, because maybe this is his approach to just like destroy the company and to.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Is Elon Musk trying to destroy Twitter?
He's like a social media Luddite,
but in a way that you couldn't sue him for, right? Like he's trying to make it appear as if he's a bumbling moron who's like trying all these things to fix Twitter, but he's actually destroying it intentionally, right? And who could say that that's not going to be a net positive on society, right? Like Elon Musk could be doing all of us a massive favor.
There are very real complaints with what Twitter has done to how we consume information. I think that, for instance, instead of reading entire articles or reading entire pieces, we just take whatever is written and accept it as a truth, right? Like whatever the character limit summary is of an article, and we just accept that as, okay, yeah, this is in fact true. Or like the massive spread of, I mean, Facebook is obviously guilty of this as well, but disinformation on Twitter, right, where certain images are shared and they're being attributed to one thing versus the next. I think we saw a lot of this really happen during the Ukraine war most recently, right? Where, like the entire stories just pop up out of nowhere that were willed into existence by Twitter users, like the ghost of Kiev and everything.
Well, but it's not just Twitter users, right? That are causing this, because we know when it comes to disinformation on Twitter, that bots are a huge problem.
Yeah, that's the bot thing,
and we know that even if bots only make up a tiny fraction of the users on Twitter, if they're able to post, 100 times, 1,000 times a day, they can have, they can be responsible for like 90% of the engagement on Twitter.
Right.
So think about how terrifying that thought is, right? When it comes to amplifying misinformation.
So I think it would be totally on brand to Elon Musk to just show up to Twitter and like disassemble it from the inside.
So there is a method to the madness. Because we're kind of like going back and forth.
We are.
So, I mean, like, if I had to pin you down, like,
if you had to pin me down, I think that he is likely trying to get as much out of his investment as possible. I think he dumped like 50 billion in there or something like that.
44 billion.
40, yeah, we're rounding up for inflation. Yeah.
It's already equivalent to 50 billion.
Yeah. I think that he is, like, I mean, what do companies like Oracle do when they acquire another tech company, right? They conduct layoffs, they run on a shoestring budget, they make it as lean as possible to squeeze as much value out of it as possible. I think that's what he's doing.
So do you think the media is kind of exaggerating some of these things? I mean, like we did point to a few concrete examples of actions that don't seem to be like, I don't know, the most well thought out, let's say.
But I think that again is part of the Elon Musk brand, where he just does things that might seem like absolutely insane from like a classical business standpoint. I think there's also a very real possibility, and I think Elon Musk has spoken pretty openly about kind of the state of his mind and his struggles with, I think, I don't want to like use the wrong diagnoses here, but I'm pretty sure he's come out saying that he has like Asperger's or something like that. Which he got criticism for too, right? But I think that there is no like strategy in that. I don't really know if he like really thought about why he's going to buy it, but now that he has it, I think he's just going to try to make money off of it, be it through like Twitter Blue, whatever. Yeah, Twitter Blue failed. They're going to get it right eventually, right? He's going to have software engineers working on it. I don't know if this is like a Machiavellian like political putsch to like, troll the libs or something like that. I think at the end of the day, Elon,
you have to follow the money.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Elon Musk is trying to like stay wealthy as fuck, and I think everything else is a distraction from it. That's my take. What about you?
Man, I think he is trying to definitely slim it down. He does have a certain vision, I'm sure. I don't know if like his execution of getting there though is actually going to be, is necessarily going to be successful, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because his actions, again, like, it doesn't matter what your vision is. It doesn't matter, what your status and perception was before. Mm-hmm. You come in here and you treat your employees like this. What are the other employees thinking when, their coworkers are getting fired on Twitter?
Yeah.
What are they thinking when he's sending out these emails like you need to work 80 hours a week? What are they thinking when there was another email he sent where he was asking them to come fly down for a meeting, just like the next day? It's like, what? Like, he seems unhinged. What that does to the morale of the workforce, I think, but that could be problematic.
How much of that is just American corporate culture, right? Even this notion of like working 80 hours a week, right? That's such like a...
But the tech bro culture is shifting that landscape. It's not like a typical, right? Like these tech companies, they don't operate the same as, say, a 50-year-old engineering firm, right?
Right.
That has 10,000 employees. That's kind of governed by these very like almost archaic labor
absolute
practices.
Well, but I think the tech bro work culture is kind of the toxic element to it here too. I think I don't know.
Well, it has its problems, but what I'm trying to say is like you can't come in with this, one mentality when this is maybe very different from what.
Aside from like the public firings, which that in itself is messed up. I don't know what the work culture at Twitter was like beforehand, right?
That's true.
Maybe they weren't openly
for sure.
Right. Most people I know who work in tech, they're putting in long hours. Like, yeah, they have like, think about all the things that like tech startup culture has kind of given the workforce writ large. Like case in point is the concept of like unlimited PTO, right? That's a very like tech company thing to do, but I think everybody would be in agreement that that's basically like a license for exploitation, right? If you have unlimited PTO, and who actually takes unlimited PTO? Like go and take like 3 months off and see what it's not unlimited.
Right.
So I think that all these things that are coming out as like pieces of evidence of like, oh my God, he's introducing this like really that's just like, that's fucking work culture in this country because we don't have labor unions to protect our rights as workers anymore. And barring a few industries which are actively unionizing, but even then, look at the resistance it's facing. We don't have any real kind of governing bodies in place to protect our rights as workers either from like a policy level. So this is just, I think, work life in America that Elon, we're kind of on a first name basis, Elon.
Our boy Elon.
Our boy Mr. Musk. Yeah. But I think he is, this whole email thing that he sent, which was then reprinted in the New York Times. It's all going into building out like the greater character of who Elon Musk is, right? This like demanding, brilliant tech dude, which I don't think he's any of those things. I think he's rich. I think he's rich as fuck, and he always has been because of his family's mining industries in Africa. And he just has money to blow on these things. And occasionally his investments pay off, but we can get into that a little bit later too. But I don't think that what he's doing is some sort of like new thing that the tech world has suddenly seen.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Elon Musk's ideology is playing a role, like his political ideology is playing a role in this, Twitter takeover?
Well, I think there is a very...
Because I just want to caveat that by saying... or kind of just clarify that point by saying it seems from the outside as if Elon has kind of transitioned from, someone who is maybe more left-leaning in some ways to someone who's kind of followed suit with everyone, as COVID evolved and post-COVID now. This transition to the right almost that has occurred, And
I'd be curious to see how like his... we should probably look this up, but how his donations have changed, right? Because there's probably like the public persona he's offering up versus like who he's giving money to.
Follow the money.
And I think that people are going to point to his unbanning of Donald Trump as something that's like really embodying like the politics of Elon Musk as it's impacting Twitter. But I mean, I think I've seen the claim being made that Elon Musk is politicizing Twitter. I don't think that's necessarily an accurate claim because I think Twitter in itself has always been a politicized entity. I think removing Donald Trump from Twitter was a political move. And that was in itself politicizing the platform. Is Elon Musk bringing in like the counter swing to more of like a conservative approach to it? I don't really know if he has like clearly defined politics, right? I think he has like this kind of nonsense position he takes sometimes, again, like free speech absolutism. But we know that's not really the case because he just banned Kathy Griffin or something like that for impersonating him on Twitter.
I know he banned just anyone that impersonated or criticized him, basically. So I mean, even just criticizing him, right?
So I don't think he really there isn't like a Muskian ideology. I think a lot of things that he does, I mean, look at, for instance, how he's managed Tesla historically, right? Where he makes very, I'd say, like inflammatory statements to draw attention to whatever thing he's working on, which then drives stock revenue at Tesla specifically, right? It was, claims made. I mean, even recently, right? Like, remember when the Cybertruck came out? There's all these claims that like, oh yeah, like the Cybertruck is going to come with its own like all-terrain vehicle you could park in the back, and then that never really manifested, and they just dropped that project too, right? Or early on when Tesla was really coming off the ground, there was the promise of having battery swap stations for your Tesla, where you could drive, pull up, just swap your batteries out for a charged one, leave your old one there to charge and drive. That never manifested either. But he kind of says all these things, like whatever he comes up with, to draw like attention to what he's doing, which kind of, in the way that our economy sort of functions at this point, it drives value in potential higher valuations for the companies that he's working on. And granted, Twitter is private right now, from what I understand. But I think that all of these like pronouncements that he's making, it's kind of bringing out the facade of activity that we're doing things. And that's why he does things like you pointed out, demanding that Twitter Blue happen in like a week, because it's not about effectively launching. It's about building out the illusion that he's some sort of competent manager that's come in to clean up. And I think, honestly, even though the New York Times piece that you quoted from with his like email to all of his coworkers, I think it was supposed to be a criticism of Elon Musk. I think they're just playing into the game. They're giving him all of the fodder. They're giving him all of the attention, which I think that is exactly what's going on.
So, there's this myth of the heroic CEO, and I think Elon Musk has embodied that to some extent, especially, with Tesla and SpaceX. But there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Very well received book, very good research, and it dived into this question, and it showed that a lot of the success that we attribute to CEOs is kind of overestimated, right? Some of it due to the halo effect, but primarily, if you look at randomness and luck, like these play a much bigger role than people want to ever admit. I mean, not just with CEOs, but with really anything in life. But I mean, you can imagine, right? Like you have the CEO of BP and the CEO of Shell, if the CEO of Shell, or if Shell as a company, is involved in some cover up or something, like automatically, like BP is going to do better. Right, by virtue of something happening to their competitor that was completely out of their control, that the CEO didn't do anything, to produce. But now the CEO of BP is going to, over time, as that company does better, relative to their competitor, they're going to be perceived as a better CEO, even though they didn't do anything. And so, like, in some ways, like, could we say some of this phenomenon of this myth of a heroic CEO has played out with Elon Musk at SpaceX and Tesla? Maybe he's not, maybe what the situation with Twitter right now is demonstrating is he's not actually as competent as we thought. Maybe there was more luck involved than we thought. Maybe there was just more elements of randomness that was favorable to Elon.
I think it's less randomness and luck. I think it's the fact that Elon Musk was born exceptionally wealthy, and I think that makes it a lot easier to.
Well, that is luck to some extent.
Well, fine, yeah, luck as much as like we're lucky to be born, and yeah, okay, fine, that's luck. But I think wealth has a lot to do with it. I think that is the greater story that is told throughout the United States. You know, if you look at, for instance, successful Hollywood actors, for instance, right? Look at how many of them actually come from very well-connected families that offered them up opportunities to practice their craft to a certain extent, right? But that's not really spoken about a lot. You usually see them, like they worked really hard at their craft, which might be true, it might be not, but I think nepotism and leaps forward that being born into money gives you are definitely factors that influence success. And then because we have this capacity to build out personas on social media and the internet, you can sort of chip away at the less savory elements of your background to present only this like brilliant CEO persona. We don't really talk about Elon Musk as the heir to like an emerald fortune in Africa, right? That's not part of the Elon Musk narrative. What we do associate him with is kind of this Tony Stark Iron Man type of character, right? That this like zany, brilliant inventor who wants to get us to Mars to colonize it and everything like that. And that's the image that's been crafted. And I think that goes in line with what you're talking about over the greater myth of like the heroic CEO, where to kind of circle back to our conversation last time about Andrew Tate, there is this image that somebody who like hustles and like works hard and does all these things and is decisive, and that is all part of the facade, right? And I think there, as we're finding, isn't that much substance to it all the time necessarily. I think there's definitely very, very competent people out there. I think Elon Musk is probably very strong on brand building to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where, in my mind, I often make the comparison with Donald Trump. Maybe, I don't know, ideologically speaking, but Donald Trump kind of embodies this like heroic CEO myth to a certain extent, right? Similar to Elon, born exceptionally wealthy, but what is Donald Trump if it's not the Donald Trump brand, right? The businessman and the casinos and the fashion shows, but those are all very like carefully curated pieces of the image. But we know that Donald Trump is a shit businessman because of the tax filings, right? And the money he owes to people, the fact he can't pay his lawyers, but that's not part of the image. So I think that's very much the shoes that Elon Musk is occupying. But let me ask you this. What do you think that this heroic CEO concept is doing to kind of the fabric of our country, right? To like what is it doing to actual competence and ability versus just branding?
I mean, it's just further propagation of like influencer culture, just the shallowness of everything, right? I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty much that straightforward. And most people, like, they don't understand any of the details. They wouldn't be able to figure this out, you know? They don't have the time, they don't have the interest, they don't have the curiosity. So, I don't know. It's just, again, something that's very superficial, which is very consistent with the way things are trending. Now, before we kind of like move on to looking at how we can address social media at large, let's talk about how Elon Musk has potentially broken liberal minds.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people kind of in my own life that are like venomously criticizing Elon Musk also own Teslas, which is kind of an interesting conundrum that I think a lot of the left is finding itself in right now, where they're simultaneously completely gung-ho about electric vehicles, and maybe 5 years ago they were absolutely worshiping Elon Musk as this like great inventor and great engineer that he positions himself to be, and now they're kind of in the uncomfortable position where they have to They have to hate him now. And the cognitive dissonance around that, I think, is very, very difficult to process. I think that the entire hysteria around Elon Musk is very, like, the hysteria that's going on right now around the Twitter acquisition specifically is very much coming from what could be called maybe like the pundit class or the professional managerial class. It's these people that occupy certain positions and certain roles that guarantee them a certain lifestyle and income base, and they're unhappy with these sort of rapid changes and sort of steps that Elon Musk is taking, and it's driving them absolutely up the wall. And the greatest irony is that they're 100% bought into it, right? That they're buying the very expensive vehicles. They're completely enamored with what Elon Musk was selling just a few years ago. And I don't know if we're noticing a lot of this like drama and vitriol coming from people that are like working 3 jobs trying to like pay the bills.
I think, one thing that's happening is we're seeing how thin the kind of like lines are between the different tribes. It's like very easy to just fall out of your tribe.
So what are the tribes?
The moment, like the left and right.
Okay.
Right, for example, right? So he was originally kind of more associated with the left, with due to kind of what he was trying to achieve with regard to climate change, and as you had talked about. But now we see like the moment you kind of associate with anything that's to do with the right, the moment you have any sympathy towards, the other tribe, mm-hmm. and I'm, this is the same on the right. The moment someone on the right has some sympathy towards some left-leaning idea or person, they get heavily criticized, and then they start to get pushed out, right? So the moment any of that, you show the slightest weakness in like strict adherence to your tribal principles, you're gone, right? And now he's kind of like, at this point, Elon Musk has essentially been banished, from the left. And where are you going to go if you're Elon Musk, right? You're not going to like become an independent, right? Politically, like you get absorbed into the other tribe, right? Because strength in numbers, I mean, it's just basic human psychology. It's not rocket science. Although Elon could hire one of his rocket scientists to prove that, right?
Do you think there's any kind of connection between Elon Musk and Joe Rogan in that sense? In terms of their...
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier, but they, along with some other, podcasters, internet personalities, maybe even politicians, like right before COVID and as COVID happened and now post-COVID, there's been a pretty clear transition, right? Like like COVID in general, I think really it broke a lot of people on both the left and the right. And there's definitely, there was a lot of pushback against the lockdowns and against some of the perceived authoritarian. Some of it, was you can actually make a case for more authoritarian kind of regulations, but real or perceived, whatever, like it was perceived that way by some people, and as a result, they essentially switched tribes. And so, I don't know. I mean...
So do you think that the acquisition of Twitter by somebody who is now... I mean, again, I'm not like 100% with it in terms of Elon's like direct political thinking. But let's say if he is now closer to the camp of the likes of Donald Trump and whatnot, and this is something I think that the government has been unable to answer, but is Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter a threat to democracy?
Probably not. Probably. Twitter, I think, is as big of a threat to democracy as it was
independent
before the acquisition of Elon. So I don't think it's like a new threat. I mean,
yes.
But I have believed that along with other social media platforms, it is a threat, but it's
independent of who holds the reins. Twitter in itself.
Mass media is a threat to democracy.
NPR is a threat to democracy.
NPR, no, I guess. I don't know. I don't listen to a whole lot of NPR, but I think they seem to do, I don't know. They're better than Fox News, I would say, but I don't really, again, I don't consume traditional media.
Yeah,
much
you read all your
days.
shit on Twitter,
Reddit, yeah. But.
Yeah, oh, man, that I think Elon had like a jab at Reddit's account coming for you next. Like, could you imagine if he just like bounced from Twitter and just acquired Reddit? That would be
that is one way to stop wokeism, is just to like basically acquire all their platforms and like just.
But I don't know what it would do to like the fabric of our society if all of a sudden all of these people that like had outlets on Reddit and Twitter to like spill their vitriol everywhere were all of a sudden squeezed out into like public life. Dude, like domestic terrorism would increase like 125%. I guarantee it.
From the left?
Yeah. Because they, now at least like they have their platforms to like pump all of their anger into.
Do you think so? That would be interesting to see. Because you see, I mean from the right, it feels like, it's kind of reaching it was reaching a boiling point, with the election fraud and everything, with the supposed election fraud, where they were absolutely, fearing that some right-wing groups would try to terrorize. I guess I think actually the FBI did stop some legitimate threats.
A couple of those are also proven to be not legitimate.
So yeah, I mean, look, we are living in an information landscape that is an absolute shit show.
So maybe going back to his like, what if this is just all a ploy to like destroy Twitter, to like free ourselves?
That's literally the best thing he could possibly do.
Is Elon Musk Morpheus from the Matrix? Is he giving us the red pill right now to wake up?
If the cost of saving democracy is $44 billion, that's cheap as hell, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh God, plus inflation, right? Yeah,
plus inflation. Yeah.
So one of the conversations that we wanted to have around this whole ordeal with Elon Musk and Twitter is maybe talk about things that could be done to improve social media, to sort of give it a chance to become something better. And if Mr. Musk is indeed listening, we hope that he does take our suggestions.
Yeah. No, we absolutely hope that he's listening. Obviously, he's not, but he is. I mean, good God, he is in the most prime position to really set the standard for like a new age of social media.
Right.
Like he can really dictate some new kind of norms in this space, right? And so let's kind of look at some of the ways we could improve social media. I think one of the biggest and maybe simplest things that we can do, something that we can do right now, is implement a sort of user verification system, right? For everyone that's on the platform. You cannot get on a social media platform without it being directly tied to, I don't know, your driver license, your passport.
Holy shit.
Like something legit. And the reason we want to do this is because you need to impose a social cost to the things that people say online, to spreading disinformation, to trolling, to, just all around shitty behavior that you see online. There's a reason why in person you don't do these things, right? Because there are consequences to doing them. You might get hit in the face. You might be, social pressure will kind of, there's going to be severe social consequences.
Granted, those things still exist on social media as well to a certain extent. Yeah, there's anonymity, right? There is like you can create an account and make up whatever.
Yeah.
But there are instances of people being found out, like when Ted Cruz liked that porn video that one time where he didn't sign into his dummy account. But
very unfortunate. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. We need to impose a social cost because in real life there are social costs. We need to do the same online. That means people have to be accountable for the things that they do online. Now, look, the internet's huge. There should still be anonymous spaces, of course. But I think if you're going to run a massive social media company, I think, and we'll get to this later, but I do think there should be regulation that requires this sort of thing if you're going to have a social media.
What do you think the appetite would be for people to actually sign up? Let's say if tomorrow Elon Musk said that to use Twitter, you have to scan a driver's license.
So that's why I'm saying I think it needs to be a federal regulation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Because I agree. If you're requiring this verification process and TikTok isn't, right, or another platform isn't, of course, the barrier to entry is much lower. People are going to flock to those. But this is why we need regulation. Another kind of consideration is the economic models that govern these platforms. We've seen with Twitter Blue, Elon is trying to implement a subscription model. Of course, that failed, obviously, because the users weren't verified. There was no distinction between verified profiles. That's kind of a different story. But I do think there is some merit in a subscription model. Now, one criticism actually could be that you kind of create a division, right, of in-group and out-group where, the wealthy get to subscribe to this premium social media service and the content is much better moderated as a result, etc. But it creates kind of two different bubbles where the poor now, don't have access to the better content. And what does that do? So there are legitimate arguments against this. One potential, counter to that would be a free subscription model where, you have a free account and a premium account. And the premium accounts, typically under these models, they subsidize the free accounts, right? And so for the premium models to incentivize people to kind of use those, I don't know, you could allow them to have control over their algorithms. You could have maybe allow them to make, one more post per day or per week or whatever the, standard is. And there should be standards for, I think, like frequency of posting, content.
And this is basically taking a social media platform, maybe imposing some of the subscription models that we see in like streaming services, where you have Hulu and then you have Hulu Premium, and Hulu Premium you pay a little bit extra, but maybe you don't have to deal with ads that pop up every couple of minutes and whatnot.
But yeah, I mean that's so it's good that you mentioned that, because the reduction or removal of ads would be another huge benefit, right? Where now these people, like the social media platform that has the subscription model, they're getting money regardless of whether you're on it or not. So all the content doesn't have to be, filtered to be the most engaging, right? It can be what's actually best for people instead of what's more engaging, because what's more engaging obviously isn't necessarily aligned with what's best for us. And yeah, so, we've seen Elon Musk kind of try to take a stab at something like this. It actually sucks that he implemented this in such a poor way,
which I think it's going to come back. I think that this is exactly what we talked about earlier, where he just says he wants it done like in 3 days. It's not possible. It's a total fuck up, but eventually it's going to be up and running. And I think this is a centerpiece of if he has any plan for Twitter. I think creating new revenue streams is something that he's very, very interested in doing, and he's talked about well before the acquisition actually went through. I think we're going to see Twitter Blue happen for sure. That's almost a guarantee.
I hope so, and I hope it's implemented very well, because like I said, he can really set a standard, and it would be great. Like I want Elon Musk to succeed. Like everyone should be like rooting for Elon to succeed. Of course, with the internet culture, everybody's trying to shit on him and criticize every move that he makes. And certainly he's made moves that are worthy of a lot of criticism. But let's be honest, like, we want to live in the best society possible. We should be rooting for Elon Musk.
Is Elon Musk going to be the one that brings about the best society as possible? I mean, I think we have, like, I don't know. I'm not quite sure if he's going to be the one that guides us to the light.
No comment.
No comment. That's also the soundbite we're going to point people to when they start hemorrhaging in the comment section saying that we hate Elon Musk and we're oppressing him. Case in point that our boy Levon is wanting him to succeed to a certain extent.
Yeah. So, okay. So another thing to consider for improving social media, another way maybe. I think the algorithms, that are kind of governing the behavior of these of the content that's shown to the users, we need to really look at these, because right now they're developed by kind of just random software developers. They don't have training in philosophy, ethics. They don't understand, like, what training do they have in, like, human nature, sociology, psychology, right? Like, they don't know shit. But they're producing these algorithms that are, potentially, kind of influencing elections. They're influencing people's daily lives, right? We should really take a hard, like, this should be like the foremost thing that's looked at, right? And I think one way that we could do it is by making these algorithms public. Like, again, we have to, not to get ahead, but we need some federal regulation that might make this a requirement, so that we actually can have some transparency and look at what's happening. We can look at the coefficients that are tied to each of these variables, right? Like, how are things weighted? We want to know these things. Because we do have some understanding of human nature, right? We know humans are loss averse. We know that they're very tribal. We know that, fear, outrage, race baiting, all these things are going to promote the most engagement. Like, that's very obvious. We know these things, but we also know they're destructive to society. We also know that at an individual level, they don't make us happy. So why the fuck are these algorithms favoring content like that? I mean, it's really a simple question, right? So yeah, I think we need studies that look at the metrics, other than likes, comments, the time spent on viewing a video. Perhaps one thing you could look at is the content of comments, right? Are they looking at the contents of comments? Maybe ones that are more positive. I don't know. Like, with the advent of AI, maybe we can really, like, take a more substantive look at some of these elements. And then maybe as technology progresses, we can introduce new forms of engagements or new metrics, right, to understand engagement, right? Perhaps some sort of mechanism to read facial expressions, right? We don't know. Like, maybe some facial expressions are tied to
certain types of posts.
That
is a racist facial expression.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, we've got to get creative. I mean, I don't know all the answers, but we need the best minds looking at this. But to reduce the kind of the core variables in these algorithms to likes, comments, and like time spent viewing the video, like, that's complete. Like, I get it, we have a limited interface, right? But we can do better. We have to do better. We don't really have a choice.
Yeah, but I think there is also a very, very fine line that we're always treading with, placing too many controls on social media, where there is kind of this potential for almost like a police state type of environment to emerge, where, yeah, okay, fine, there's like an algorithm that like inflicts justice and like rips comments out because they're coming off a certain way, or heaven forbid, like retina scanners gauging like attitudes before something is posted. I think that they're not to like interject with the slippery slope. It's a very complex problem to solve by arbitration, right? Because there's always going to be the question of what makes somebody indeed qualified to ensure that a comment is up to standards. But I agree with you 100% on the algorithms. I think there definitely needs to be a review of sorts, maybe from like a federal governing entity, to ensure that algorithms aren't damaging to us to a certain extent.
Sure, but I mean, so what I'm saying though is basically only about the algorithms, at least thus far, right? So whether we make those changes or not, as they currently are, they are promoting certain types of content. So you're not really adding any more like strictness. You're not adding whatever. Like it's already promoting things based on a certain set of rules. All you're saying is, let's change the rules to be more favorable to the well-being of society.
Right.
And
right.
I think that we can agree on.
Right. I think that there has been enough research done on the impact of social media and its algorithms on how young people develop, things along those lines. So yeah, there's probably there's an idea there.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I alluded to earlier, like we need this regulation, I think, to be at a federal level. If one social media company takes it upon themselves to make these changes,
and one doesn't, it's going to create like almost like a vacuum of sorts, where there's always, if one ethical social media company emerges with like fully well-functioning ethical algorithms and controls in place for verification, the next second there's going to be a social media platform that pops up that offers the exact opposite. And I think that's what people are going to flock to.
Yeah. We know what people prefer. We already know, and we know like that social media platform that's actually good for us is going to be less engaging. Like that's a fact. We have to accept that fact, that if we want to live in a society with healthy social media platforms, we're going to be spending less times on our phone. Right? We like, if we can't come to grips with that, we are doomed, because we know what drives engagement.
Yeah.
That is absolutely well known. There's no question.
And I think at the end of the day, any form of reform or modification to social media, to internet usage, to anything is always going to be a band-aid solution. What we really need to do is we need to start, I think, reinvesting in education, in public education, to make sure that we have individuals entering society that are capable of critical thought, that aren't going to be reading things verbatim, and that can become themselves ethical users of the internet without having to have all these controls in place.
So I somewhat disagree with you. I mean, I think what you said is correct, that we do need to promote a better society where people are able to think critically for themselves. However, think about how difficult that change is going to be, right, to make, versus changing the algorithms, versus federal regulation of social media. And let me give you an example of some of the regulations, right? We could add age restrictions, right, to social media.
That's
18 or older. Okay, yeah. We have that for alcohol. Why not have that in the online space, right? We have it in the physical world. Let's have it in the digital realm. Screen time restrictions, maybe based on age. I mean, we've seen with the iPhone, with iOS, they're offering the screen time monitoring. But now, can we impose restrictions? Can we federally mandate that? I don't know. That's getting into murky waters, right? With very murky waters. But just throwing out these ideas, maybe restricted days for exploring content outside of like your defined region, whether that is your city, your state, your country, probably something not as large as like your country. Maybe, I'm thinking really more local. Maybe you only have one day a week where you get exposed to all the content in the world, right? Or all the content from the world. You only get exposed on a normal day to content in your city, let's say. What that also does is impact the exposure to people of much higher status than you would normally be exposed to within your city. Instead of competing with people in your nation or in the world for attractiveness, if you're a female for attractiveness, if you're a male for status, right? Now you're competing with people in your city. And all of a sudden, people that don't have such a high status are a little bit more attractive to you, let's say, or you're not as depressed because these people are kind of more along your, the status that you have. So that could be a huge benefit. I mean, that sort of delocalization of status, I think, is a very interesting topic. That
I think that is absolutely a horrifying scenario you're painting. I mean, that is, yeah, that I think to a certain extent is a very paternalistic solution.
Okay.
Because that is a government entity absolutely controlling access to information that somebody can get. That is like, that ain't the solution. I think most of the things I was with you on it, I think you're with something on age restrictions. I think that in itself is probably the most effective thing that we could do, and it'd probably have the most support. But the amount of just divisions in society that would be created by preventing people from freely accessing information how they see fit. And it's also not...
well, hold on. Like, I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, on social media platforms, like the big social media platforms, and that's, again, like, I get it. There's a gray area because, like, first of all, what constitutes a big, like, social media platform, right? Is like, okay, Twitter is big by all accounts. Is Reddit big? Probably. Okay, like, when you start going down the list, like, what's big? You still have the internet. You still have access to information all over the world if you want. You still have all the news sources. But because of how social media apps essentially gamify news, gamify social interaction online, they, to me, fall into a special category where I think it can provide a net benefit in society to really regulate it. Of course, it's going to be difficult and it can be abused. But I mean, here's the argument I'd make to you. Like, you look at the physical world and you see how much regulation there is in the physical world of different activities, right? Mm-hmm. Look at the fucking laws that we have. There's so many laws, right? We don't even know all the laws. We need lawyers to understand what the fuck's going on half the time. The online space is essentially in its Stone Age, right? The equivalent of its Stone Age. Like, it's the Wild West, in my opinion. And so if all I'm proposing is you have some regulation on a very specific category of the online space, right? In only a specific area of the online space, that is social media. To me, that's not like, I mean, you're kind of like, I felt like you were painting a bit of like a 1984.
Well, that's what it kind of sounded like. Because I think ultimately speaking, that is an entity deciding that it knows better for the majority, right? I think there are very real controls. You had the very accurate example of things being regulated as is, right? Alcohol consumption, marijuana, things like that. I think that age restriction is a very important thing, right? Okay. Just in that how there are age restrictions on things like pornography, for instance, those are, I mean, who really takes them seriously, right? I think that we need to have them in place to give, let's say, parents tools to work with to a certain extent, right? To make it easier for them. But I think that everything else, it should still be hands off. I mean, even on Twitter, like it is somebody's, I think, an expression of freedom to be able to go on Twitter and to be able to search things and see things that are happening anywhere in the world, right? Without restriction, without any sort of parameters.
Okay. What if these restrictions only applied to people like, I think the issue that you take most issue with, or the point that I made that you take most issue with, is this restricted days for exploring content outside of your region. To a certain extent, yeah. Right? And yeah, that is the most like authoritarian point, for sure. And I'm not saying like that's necessarily like, it's not like I'm not married to like this idea. I'm throwing shit against the wall to see what might stick, right? And what I'm saying is like, this is an idea that can potentially solve the issue of, us being exposed to things that have kind of been proven to be bad for, on an individual level. And I think even in things like in terms of like dating markets, where you're exposed to people of the highest status and attractiveness all around the world. I don't know. Like, yeah, like maybe it is a bad idea to do that, but maybe you can fine tune it. Maybe you say it's only applicable to people under 18.
But there's also an amazing amount of information that you get about other places and other localities. I think that
there's a cost to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like there's a cost to everything, right? But the most valuable thing I think that this discussion has pointed out is the age restriction aspect to it, because I think that's something you would find a lot of people are in agreement over, because with all the research being done into how algorithms, like we were talking earlier, how algorithms do impact developing minds, how it impacts habits in young people. we've discussed in the past on the show, the suicide rates that are prevalent in adolescents because of things like Instagram. I think more effective age limits on it are true. And I think that's in line with how we function as a society, right? There are certain things that you can and cannot do at certain ages, and at varying stages of maturity, you're kind of granted more and more freedoms. So driving a car, for instance, is a good example of it. I think that's in line with, it leaves a chance for some of these critical thinking skills to develop and senses of individuality to develop, unencumbered by like nonsense in social media. So yes, that I think is the most valid point out of that in terms of federal regulation. Everything else, I think it wouldn't stand up to.
Well, I mean, on one level, I agree. I think it would be difficult for it to be implemented. I think it could be abused, but it also kind of, to me, like personally, it depends on how social media platforms evolve, right? If they do make those other changes and they become more pleasant and healthy online spaces, then you need less regulation, right? They're naturally going to be just a positive thing. But if we're finding it, if over time we continue to find it very difficult to kind of contain, like the ill effects of social media, I don't see why we can't view it as like basically like the equivalent of like casinos, right? In the physical world, where we do have very strict regulations, right, on gambling and casinos. And if, why not have the same strictness towards, again, these social media spaces that have gamified social interaction?
Because I think that's still the exchange of information. And I think the exchange of information is still very critical.
Sure.
I think that opens up a lot of doors to controlling things that people see in general, which we already have a problem with to a certain extent. But if there is indeed like a governing agency that oversees these sorts of things, what's to prevent that governing agency from preventing stories criticizing said governing agency to get attention?
But we're talking about exclusively content on social media. We're talking about social media. Like, you still have the internet at your disposal.
But let's think about how even the media is consumed, right? How are stories shared? If a story breaks, it's going to get a lot of traction on Twitter, and it's important to get traction on Twitter. That's the utility of Twitter to a certain extent. Otherwise, I think it's hand in hand with the argument over improving education and training to make sure people know how to access information and whatnot. But a lot of news, even if it's an article from the New York Times, is going to be tracked and it's going to get attention from its presence on social media.
I guess maybe another question I have, again, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, because, I mean, I have the same concerns that you have about content moderation and censorship. And we discussed it on the last episode. If anyone's interested in checking that out,
please do.
But, like some of these things I mentioned, they're not really, the only thing that affects content moderation is what's outside of your region. But it's not actually, but it's simply based on geography, which is a very objective measure. Yeah. It's not like, well, we're going to censor left-leaning content today and right-leaning content tomorrow, and then Andrew Tate content on Wednesday. It's geographically based, which is like a very like concrete and objective measure that you could potentially have people actually agree on. Like, there's very few things at this point that people seem to agree on, right? But geography is one that is kind of indisputable.
I think it would isolate people, to be honest, because I think that's the value of the internet, is that it does have. You're able to, the information you access from other regions is going to inform your position.
So do you think if they add, let's say they added this, right, on weekends, you can engage with any content worldwide, right? But during the week, content is limited to your local sphere.
But why? Like,
to promote more. To promote your local environment.
But that should be on the individual to seek out local environments. It shouldn't be on some sort of like larger entity to control when you could access something.
Sure.
Because I mean, think about the statement that you just made. You're allowed to do something at one part of the week. On the next part of the week, something gives you the permission to do it. The fact that something is giving you permission, that's outside the bounds of, I think, of what free access to information would be. I think the issue is like that's still a Band-Aid solution. I think the problem is that we're not accessing local information. And I think maybe, like, I see what you're saying about we're talking about social media channels, right? But I think the fact that there would be a third party policing when you can and cannot access something, that in itself, that's not a solution. That is, I think it would be a very paternalistic thing, because it would be a tacit agreement that something knows better than us, whatever that something is, be it a government agency or a commission or something.
Well, let me ask you this. What would, let's say, and I don't want to like just get stuck on this point, but I think it's interesting to disagree. Like, I don't entirely disagree. I think you're making valid points. And just because I wrote this down, down as a bullet point, I'm not married to it. And I think, I mean, you're throwing shit on the wall, and this is the point, to discuss this topic. And it's interesting. I think it's fascinating. What was I going to say? I think there's also technical limitations, right? Like how would we actually impose such a level of censorship? And then could that then be used to censor other, spaces on the internet?
Absolutely,
right? So that part is the most slippery slope that I see. But I do take your concern of its paternalistic nature. If there were studies that showed this has an immense benefit to society, because if you think about, for most of human history, like our interactions with others have been at a very local level, right? I mean, we've been contained. The scope of like human perception of their environment has been very local. Like I don't know, within maybe a few miles radius of like where you were born even, right? And so to try to maybe revert back to that to some extent, is that like, I don't know, is that the worst thing in the world?
It's not the worst thing if it's done organically and I think there is a certain extent that happening.
Okay, let's explore that. Hold on, what are ways we could incentivize emphasis on the local?
We don't have to incentivize anything. I think it's an organic thing that happens where people, I think at a certain age, maybe they take interest into the communities in which they live, maybe when they start raising families or when they get tired of the potholes in their street. There is no incentive that is needed. I think it has to be organic or it shouldn't happen at all. And because with incentives, again, it implies that somebody knows better. And I think there is a wealth of individuals that are very interested in their communities, that join interest committees, that organize activist groups to focus on local issues. Those things happen. And I think there are going to be people who are interested in that and people who aren't.
Okay, let's hold on. So you're talking about organic kind of, this should happen organically, but the truth is like what social media content is promoted isn't necessarily organic. It's determined by algorithms, and human nature, we know, is incredibly biased towards, the highest status, right? It's a winner take all attention economy. And we know that these things could be bad for us. Like if studies showed that like this is increasingly focusing on things at a global scale, news at a global scale, like we kind of already know that's having ill effects on people. And it's not necessarily an organic. I mean, it could be organic, but like just because it's natural doesn't also necessarily mean it's in our best interest. I don't know. Like, I guess my question to you is almost is like, is anything really organic? Like, if social media algorithms are amplifying certain types of content because of the way
but interest is organic. If somebody's interested in local events and local happenings, it's because they're interested in, not because an algorithm is dictating or something. I think that. I mean, there is, yes, most conversations are happening around things that are happening in like the federal level of things, but it does not exclude participation, interest in local issues as well, right? And I just take issue with the incentives or any of these sorts of things, right? There is a focus on like national events and national occurrences, but I don't think that precludes like portions of our society still caring about what happens in their own communities, right?
Yeah. To be continued, that discussion. I don't know. We can continue on maybe the final slide here on improvement of social media, but it just goes back to maybe imposing a social media tax. I don't know how exactly that would be implemented, but what if, we use that tax to, say, promote educational content on social media?
Yeah, if you want a shit post, you have to pay 25 cents.
Or use that to regulate social media effectively, with, say, the age restriction, right? I don't know. Like, they make so much money, these social media platforms. It would be nice to be able to, like a carbon tax that could be helpful potentially. Maybe this is something that can help the online space be regulated a little bit. Yeah. Not in a paternalistic manner, but maybe just a little bit of regulation.
Sure, yeah. Maybe over business practices too, right? If you're making money off of ad revenue to a certain extent.
To provide more business scrutiny, yeah.
Right. Like if you're using these algorithms to churn ads, well then a percentage of that should go back into public funding. I could agree with that.
All right, we actually agree on something. Well, yeah, I mean, I think regardless, again, those were some topics to discuss. Like we just need the best minds to be looking at this. If social media is as important to our society as it appears to be, like what the hell? Like what are we doing? Like how is this not garnering more attention and focus? I mean, it's building, but it's like we literally need the best people. And like you asked earlier, like is Elon Musk the person to lead us? In that regard. I mean, I don't know.
But say what you will, we're talking about it now. And maybe this was the master plan all along.
What a plan!
Whereby by dropping $44 billion plus inflation on Twitter, Elon did it just so people start critically evaluating Twitter. He, in fact, is the benevolent savior.
Galaxy brain move from Elon Musk.
Total space brain stuff.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty much sums up all of our thoughts on every topic ever, and we're done with the podcast. Our relationship after that argument is forever tarnished. And it's all over. This is the last episode of Radius of Reason. But still, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Smash that like button.
We will have more Andrew Tate clips.
We're just going to become an Andrew Tate hate podcast. That's the only way we're ever going to attract clout. Yeah. Is there an Andrew Tate hate podcast out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, we'll have shorts for you guys. If you see the same content over and over again, apologies, but we need to promote our channel. So
and we really
bear with us.
We do appreciate the engagement in the comment section, even though we're talking smack about it earlier.
Yes, and actually, we want to highlight a comment we received on our video. I believe it was, "Is Andrew Tate a misogynist?" And this was a comment from @RecentHuman. So he had recently just evolved from our common ancestor.
Welcome.
And his comment was, "You will cringe at yourself when you actually get with women in real life and get humbled." So thank you @RecentHuman for that absolutely amazing, enlightened comment.
And please comment again.
And comment more. We will put, if you continue to comment on our videos, every episode will end with one of your comments. This is a promise. Even if we reach Joe Rogan levels of fame, like you will be highlighted
every episode,
at the end of every episode. And with that, thank you for listening. We'll be back again soon with another episode of Radius of Reason.
Stay safe, everyone.
Adios.
That get too heated?